Hybrids come in many different spices and flavors. Some are 48-volt mild hybrid systems, while other ones are full hybrids that emphasize performance or fuel efficiency. There's also plug-in hybrids that allow you to travel on electrons alone.
Today we're comparing two three-row crossovers. Behind us here we've got the 2024 Toyota Grand Highlander, which we've been in for a while now as we're doing a long-term test of it. While it's great for cargo space, it's got a little bit of an issue with fuel efficiency.
Yeah, that's that hybrid max powertrain, which seems to emphasize performance rather than efficiency. But over here is the 2024 Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid, which features a 17.8 kilowatt-hour battery, and that allows it to travel up to 40 kilometers on electric power alone. It's interesting to check these two cars out because they both have totally different hybrid powertrains.
So what we're going to do today is find out which one has the better hybrid powertrain and which one is a better family vehicle overall.
So let's jump in the Mazda and get started. So here we are in the 2024 Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid. And now this is the GT model, which is the range-topping model, which starts at around $67,000. And although you can get a cheaper model for closer to $60,000. And it has 323 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. That's a little bit less horsepower than the Toyota, but it doesn't feel particularly slow. It's just that the Toyota just feels really impressive with the way that it delivers its performance. And I think that's where the Grand Highlander Hybrid Max really kicks butt. Like, it just hauls.
I mean, as great as that is, when it comes to a family vehicle with 3 rows of seats.
Yeah.
It's not really something you're looking for. I don't know. I guess it depends on the driver.
I agree. I think, you know, the priority isn't always straight line performance. I don't think that families are looking for that kind of performance. What they really want is fuel efficiency. And while the Hybrid Max Grand Highlander is rated at, like, I think 8.8 liters per 100 kilometers.
Yep.
I've never been able to achieve that kind of fuel efficiency with the vehicle. And this is a little bit more achievable in terms of its fuel efficiency. And you get the added benefit of having 40-ish, 42 kilometers of all-electric range, which is pretty repeatable. And, you know, if you're just doing a school run every day, you might not even need to fuel your car for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, so we've had the Grand Highlander for a little while now because we're doing a long-term test of it and recently put it up against the TX. But its fuel efficiency, it really isn't all that great. I mean, again, it's hybrid max. It's not the normal hybrid, which gets a little bit better fuel economy than the hybrid max. But again, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker for the Toyota. I do think, though, that if fuel economy is what your main goal is, then you don't really have a choice. You got to go with the CX-90, unless you are doing lots of driving that is above the 40 kilometers of electric range, because then it's closer to the same. Right.
And then, of course, you can get the regular hybrid version of the Highlander, which is really, really fuel efficient.
Yeah, you're almost better off like bumping down a bit. Yeah. And I don't think you lose much content either.
No, I don't think you lose much content. It's just that you would lose a little bit of the performance, which is one of the highlights of the Grand Highlander. Whether or not you want it or not, it's one of the big things worth mentioning in the Grand Highlander. But another thing worth talking about is all the space. Now, this is the biggest Mazda that they've ever made, and I still feel that's a tiny bit cramped, especially for kids. And I have a baby seat back there, and you've had a child seat back there. It's not a very spacious place to be.
It's not the most family-friendly car if you've got a younger family.
Right.
If you've got older kids, maybe it's a little better, but if you've got older kids and you absolutely need to use that third row a lot, you're not going to get a whole ton of space in the Mazda. You'll get way more in the Grand Highlander. Yeah,
and the best part about the Grand Highlander is that third row is actually functional for, like, adults. Like, it's spacious. So I'm happy with that. But I think equipment is something that we should touch on, because the Mazda has a lot of equipment, really good equipment too. Some of the things worth pointing out: it has a head-up display, it has vented front seats along with heated front seats and a heated steering wheel, it has heated rear seats, and it has a 3-zone climate control system. However, all of those features are in the Toyota as well.
I was just about to say, you're naming all these features, and I'm pretty sure they're all in the Grand Highlander, so
there's nothing really like that stands out in this car in terms of equipment, but I will point out something that really caught my eye. This infotainment system is mostly operated with this rotary knob, which is a little clumsy to use. There is a touchscreen in one specific use case, and that's when you're using wireless Apple CarPlay. Android Auto, they still have to use the knob, which is kind of annoying. Because I have an Android device.
I did not know that because I recently switched phones and I did have an Apple and it was working, and I sort of just assumed that it would for Android also.
How weird and annoying is that? I mean, it just feels...
That's extremely weird because when I spoke to the Mazda reps a couple years ago and we were testing the CX-90 as a long-term test, and they showed me how to like connect to the phone or to Apple CarPlay and that you could still use touch, their reasoning for letting you use touch with your phone is that that's what you're used to when you're using your phone. So it makes more sense that you'd use it there, but you're doing the same thing on Android Auto. I mean, it could be an update that's coming or something of that sort, but it's kind of unfair to Android users.
I think so. It's kind of discriminatory.
Yeah. We
should discuss the road manners in these vehicles. It's not like people drive three-row crossovers to have some fun with and go and, canyon carving.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, fine. If that is the case, I will say that the Mazda is slightly more responsive and engaging to drive. I like the steering in this car a lot. The steering wheel is really nicely weighted, and just the way the car rides on the road is pretty good. It's firm, but not stiff, which is a rare combination that's hard to find, especially in this class where a lot of the cars are really like floaty and kind of vague feeling, which is okay because you kind of want a comfy ride for your kids. But, you can just feel a little disoriented sometimes when you're trying to find out exactly where the car is on the road.
I would say it feels a tiny bit smoother than the Grand Highlander, but also you can tell when you're driving that it's a little bit smaller. As much as I like the Grand Highlander for it not feeling as big as it is, this definitely you can tell is smaller when you're driving it.
Yeah, it drives small. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And that's difficult to do. I think if you've driven other large three-row crossovers like the Hyundai Palisade or the Chevy Traverse, those things feel huge, like huge. Like they're taking up the whole road. Yeah. And this doesn't have that feeling, even though I think dimensionally it's not far off. We should talk about cargo space because cargo-wise, the CX-90 is really far behind the Grand Highlander. It just doesn't come close in terms of what the Grand Highlander has in terms of cargo space.
Well, aside from that like swoopy look too, that cuts into a bit of its space.
Yeah.
The Grand Highlander, which is made to fit adults in the third row, accommodates like even the back having a little more cargo space. So a lot of the times when we have driven those bigger cars, like we had the Yukon recently, and while you get a lot of third row legroom in the Yukon, the cargo space behind the third row is so minimal.
It's useless. Okay.
Yeah, and at least in here you get sort of both.
Right.
Or sorry, not in here, in the Grand Highlander. In here you get pretty much the same as that.
Now that we've talked a little bit about the CX-90, let's jump into the Grand Highlander for a little bit because we've driven a bunch and see what that's like to drive, especially back to back like this.
So now we're in the 2024 Toyota Grand Highlander again.
This is the Hybrid Max,
yes.
A fully loaded model too. How much does this cost again?
This one is something like $67,000.
So it's not far off of the price of the CX-90, the one that we had in particular. But I think if you're closer to the lower range of the CX-90, maybe it's worth it just for that hybrid powertrain, right?
Yeah.
That plug-in hybrid powertrain. But one of the things that Mazda's really been trying to push is this idea that they're a bit more premium than other mainstream brands like Toyota. And they're trying to emphasize that with like fancy Napa leather seats and like the layout and the design. It feels a little bit more, I don't know, curated.
Yeah, but like, who are you, like, who's your demographic? Because I don't want that fancy stuff for my kids who are going to be messy anyway.
Okay. And it's not like this is particularly
sorry.
ugly or anything like that. Like, I actually really dig the seats in this car, and it has like these cool bronze accents everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Grand Highlander is lacking interior style.
Nope.
But the exterior style is a bit clumsy. It's a boxy car, right?
Yeah, but okay, I guess there are two people who like the swoopies like the Mazdas.
The swoopies?
And the boxies like the Toyota. And to be completely honest, I like the boxies.
Okay, cool. A little like it looks rugged. It might not really mean that it's rugged.
Yeah, I guess that is the thing though. Boxy generally does sort of entail somewhat rugged. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Or
would
practical.
call it. Yeah, well, it is practical.
It's huge.
As we've talked about, like, there's way more space in the Grand Highlander than in the CX-90.
And it's not just like passenger and cargo space. One of the things that really stood out for me in this car is like the random stuff space, which is something all parents probably know about or need. There's like shelves and cubbies, and this thing is huge. Like, I have so much stuff in here. It's brilliant. I love it. I think it's great.
Yep, there's so many places to hide things, and same thing as we talked about before, that little shelf thing that's right in front of the front passenger.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Handy. Everything is smartly designed here, and I think that goes a little bit beyond the fanciness that Mazda's trying to kind of impress on us.
Practicality over fancy.
Yeah, but while we were driving, I heard a little bit of beeping coming from your side of the car. What's going on with that?
Okay, so first of all, if I look away for pretty much a second, sometimes it's even just to like look back here to make sure no one's coming in my blind spot, the Toyota tells me that I'm not paying attention.
And now the Mazda does that occasionally as well, but I feel like the Toyota is super sensitive. And there's also, I think, a feature that tells you that cars are coming during an intersection or something. It makes me feel like they don't believe that I'm an active or an aware driver.
Yeah, and I mean, those things I'm sure you can take off in the settings area.
Right.
And I get that, like, to some extent, I don't mind it because it almost feels like they are working, which is a lot of my issue with some of the safety aids, is that with such a big car, you want them. But in the back of your mind, you're also like, are they going to work 100% of the time?
And now all these cars have a bunch of drive modes. I didn't find them to be particularly useful. And one of the things that really triggered me about the Mazda CX-90 is that there's no really like natural way to make it save the EV battery or preserve the EV battery. So if you've charged that up and you want to use that in a particular part of your road trip, there's no sensible way to kind of figure out how to do that. And that was really annoying because other plug-in hybrids allow you to pick and choose when and where you want to use your electric range. And so that makes more sense. So you don't want to waste it all on a highway where it's inefficient to do so. You want to maybe use it in a more city conditions.
One of the things that I'm not 100% about is this center walkthrough here. Because as much as there's enough space to walk through, which I appreciate because there are some vehicles that you can't fit perfectly through that center when there are two captain's chairs.
Yeah.
This one you can at least walk through, but it has that little cubby thing at the bottom that's a storage space. And I guess for some people you might use it.
Right.
But for us it was just an extra space to throw things in. But in the winter and the rain, and we've had this car now for a while and it's gone through some like seasonal changes, it just gets dirty, especially if you're gonna keep, crossing over it or through it.
Okay.
It's just easier with nothing there.
Okay.
But the Mazda has a different issue.
Now the Mazda actually has a little bit more space back there because it has this flip-up cup holder, which is super flimsy looking, and I can't, like, somebody's gonna step on that by accident, and I don't know how, if that thing will withstand the weight of a child just stepping on it.
I even think, and again, this is being in this car through a couple seasons, is that it's not so much the summer that's the issue, it's winter. And trudging in all the like winter boots and huge jackets and just like being like sloppy as you get in and move around everywhere. It's a mess.
Right.
And that's not gonna work well with kids back there.
As I mentioned before, the CX-90 plug-in hybrid starts at around $58,000. You can get the non-plug-in hybrid model, which uses a Turbo 6, I believe, for around $46,000. But the plug-in hybrid GT that we drove is closer to $68,000. And then if we compare that to the Toyota Grand Highlander, that hybrid max that we've been driving also tops out at $68,000, but starts as low as $53,000. So there's some interesting price ranges here that we're talking about, because you can get a cheaper CX-90 altogether, and that helps with people for people on a budget. And then if you're getting the plug-in hybrid model, you might be entitled to some incentives because it's a plug-in vehicle.
The cheapest CX-90 is still a mild hybrid, right?
It's a 48 volt mild hybrid.
Yeah, you won't save a ton of money on gas or anything.
No.
But
I think I have a pretty good idea of which car I would recommend to families, but there are some caveats here and there. If you have something that you're really focused on, like fuel efficiency or space, it helps make that decision a little bit easier. It's very funny, when I first drove this car, I was like, it's just a boring old 3-row that nobody really likes.
I felt the complete opposite.
And I was like, I don't think it's that special. It didn't feel special. I didn't think that the interior was all that impressive. I thought the features were kind of lacking, especially if you've been in something like the Palisade or the Telluride.
Yep. Yeah.
And then the more time you spend with it, the more you're like, no, this works for people.
See, I kind of feel like I had the opposite, but like brought back down to like, it does work for people. But I got in that first time I drove it, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I think my other thing is that in my mind, I was comparing it a little bit to the Highlander, and the Highlander is very blah.
It's very old too, right?
Yeah.
Like it hasn't been updated in a long time. So I think the standard Highlander was just in need of some attention, and this took all that attention away from it for sure.
Yeah.
Now the real question is, do these 3-row crossovers replace a minivan in the mind of a family-friendly vehicle? I would say no. I think if you need all the space that you can possibly get in a livable package, the minivan is still the pick, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you've read anything I've written, then you probably know that my pick is the minivan, but also because my kids just sort of stand and wait at the door of this one.
Waiting for it to slide open?
Yeah, and it doesn't, so. But honestly, why can't they just put a sliding door on this?
Both of these 3-rows are pretty good for families on the go, and they both emphasize fuel efficiency in different ways. Now, if all you care about is fuel efficiency and you get the added benefit of its zero emissions range, you should pick that Mazda. There's also a couple of federal incentives here in Canada that help lower the overall costs.
That said, the Toyota Grand Highlander wins pretty much in every other way possible. It's got way more space in there, and it is a better overall family vehicle if you're going to be using that 3rd row. For those reasons, the winner for today is a 2024 Toyota Grand Highlander.
For Driving.ca, I'm Sammy Hadjasad.
And I'm Renita Narain. For more SUV comparisons and reviews, follow us on social media or check out our website.
It's very funny because usually red lights mean stopping or bad. But in recording, red lights are good.
You're not supposed to talk right now.
Why?
Clayton said don't talk.
Don't provide any any video worthy dialogue is what he's concerned about.